Hi, everybody. This is Jim Reeves. We're beginning with a tune that is promising to be a very successful recording. Thanks very much to all of you. Welcome to my world.
Welcome to my world. Won't you come on in? Miracles, I guess.
No matter what kind of mood you're in, when you turn a Jim Reeves song on, it just has that placating, mollifying, conciliating way of just, if you're happy, it sort of makes you happier. And if you're a little bit down, you play a little sad song and you recognize things are going to get a lot better. It's a gift. It's very hard to describe. There will only be one gentleman, Jim Reeves.
Built with you in mind.
We intended celebrating something around the 25th anniversary because let's not forget that fact that whilst we're enjoying a lot of reminiscing today about a fan club that existed for 11 years, really we're here for one purpose only, and that is to remember the 25th anniversary of the passing of Jim Reeves. I'm sure to a man we can all stand up and say we are fans of Jim Reeves, and that's why we're here.
I'll be waiting here.
Every single record that was released on Jim Reeves for almost 10 years got into the Billboard playlist. No other artist in any field of music in the history of the music business has ever done what Jim Reeves has done with his voice and with his records. Presley hasn't done it yet. Crosby never did. None of them have ever done it. The records will show that.
Smooth, just mellow. And anytime he comes on that radio, I knew about to have to stop my car, and I turn it up loud, and if my children are making any racket in the car, I say, y'all hush, because one of the most beautiful voices God ever give to a human being is fixing to sing. I don't think there's ever been a more beautiful voice than Jim Reeves. He soothes me.
Just for you.
Well, as a legend, and was born in Panola County, Texas on August 20th, 1924. Jim was deceased as of July 31st, 1964, killed south of Nashville, Tennessee, and in Brentwood. The cause of Jim Reeves' death was a turbulent storm as he was piloting a single-engine Beechcraft Debonair.
Welcome to my world.
Welcome aboard the old chuck wagon, friends and neighbors. I take particular pride in introducing this next young gentleman. He and I were born in the same county down in East Texas. That would be Panola County. Carthage is the county seat. Give a hand to Jim Reeves. Yes, sir. How are you, Jim?
Just fine, Tex, but you know, I think you made a mistake. I'm not from Carthage.
Oh?
No, I'm from, well, about 10 miles east of Carthage.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is right to tell the truth about it.
When I was 5 years old, I heard my first phonograph recording. I was in the pasture with a pet pig of mine, and I suddenly was a bit startled by the sound of this music from the house. I couldn't imagine what had happened. And I went there to investigate, and here sits a little suitcase-looking concern with a crank on it, and this music's coming from it. And I was 5, remember, and I couldn't understand how in the world so many people could get in that one suitcase.
It becomes a reality that you are being led, if you like, by the music. It's purely and simply the music. And the music leads to further fascinations in the man. You know, what was the man like that produced this sound?
I love you because you understand, dear, every single thing I try to do. You're always there to lend a helping hand, dear. love you most of all because you're you.
Jim Reeves loved Panola County and Carthage. He talked about it all the time. We used to tell those stories of the days he spent on Merval Creek, Sockagee Bottom, around Deadwood, DeBerry, when he used to walk a lot of times back home after school after practicing baseball. Many a night he slept in the bus station of the depot so he'd be sure and get to school. He was absolutely, completely dedicated to everything he did. The bringing up and the raising that he was taught by his lovely mother had a great, great bearing on the way Jim Reeves lived. Jim Reeves' word was good. He learned that grew up right here. If he told you tomorrow was Christmas, you hung up your stocking. He was that kind of guy.
Jim's father died when he was 42 years old, in the middle of making a crop. Suspicion was he probably had a bleeding ulcer, something they could cure today probably in 6 weeks, but that's the way the world was. But they were farming people, and well, I don't think anybody back then in this part of the country had what's known as an easy upbringing. They were very family-oriented, and everybody just kind of rooted out of living the best way they could.
Well, he had an old guitar when he rode that bus from DeBerry that, I don't know, it didn't look like it was $2. He'd kept it in the back of the bus, and he'd sit back in the back of the bus and beat on it and all until he got to school, and then he'd just pitch it over in a corner, and sometime it'd be there for 2 or 3 days on that before he'd pick it up again. But it was, someone told us that he had traded a bushel of pears for it. Now, I don't know whether that was true or not.
In Panola County, Texas, there's only one high school, and I rode a bus 30 miles to school. Somehow I managed to get through high school. I participated in football, baseball, and track, basketball, and everything.
And he used to listen to the Jimmie Rodgers records, as we all did, when he first heard the phonograph records, he called them. And even when he died, he could still practice those guitar runs that Jimmie Rodgers did on his guitar.
Jim was especially talented, and he had a real athletic ability, which opened some doors for him. And he was fortunate enough, as a baseball star, to get an opportunity to go to university.
Hello, Mary. That little song's for you, 'cause that's your name, you know, Mary. Yes, that's the girl I love, Mary.
We met at a country music dance in my hometown of Marshall, Texas. And I had a date with a boy that Jim had gone to school with. And we went to the dance, and Jim came to the dance by himself. And he came over to say hello to this boy that he knew. And, of course, we were introduced, and that was the way we met. He was a baseball player at that time. He played for the next year or two professionally, and then he got hurt. He was a pitcher, and he turned to throw a guy out at first base. And he fell and hurt his leg.
What we have here is all of the original equipment used by Jim Reeves from 1947 to 1952. Jim and his business partner, Tom Perryman, own the radio station KGRI in Henderson, Texas. All of the equipment still works and is the equipment that he used there.
He went up to this little station, one of the first stations of the new stations after World War II, and just decided he'd like to become a disc jockey, a radio announcer, and he come up and auditioned and got a job, and he sat right here at this board, we call them, turntable and board and all, and disc jockeyed and played records and picked his guitar and sang with a live show from about 1947 up until 1952, right here in this very equipment. When he got on the radio, he did a live show about every day or maybe 3 days a week playing the guitar, just he and the guitar singing.
He decided, while he was sitting there playing other people's records, that he could sing as well as they could, or better. So he decided that's what he wanted to do.
I was asked to come to work for KWKH in Shreveport, Louisiana, and I was asked to come there to announce for this radio station, and to MC a portion of the Louisiana Hayride. Now, this is the show where a lot of stars got their start. Kitty Wells, Johnny and Jack, Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, and Farron Young, many other country and western artists had their beginning in Shreveport with the Louisiana Hayride.
And he kept coming along, and all the time when he worked these shows with me, these local talent shows, I knew all the time that Jim Reeves was a ballad singer, because he used to sing those ballads, country, but mostly he sang a lot of the pop standard ballads. Never knew that Jim was a high-sounding, singing novelty singer, as his first records were.
Jim Reeves, yes, sir.
South of the border, hey, I know a lad. He's got more fun than anybody's had. Don't got no worry, don't got no dough. Everybody's wondering about Mexican Joe. Dancing, romancing, always on the go. Sun shining down on Mexican Joe.
One Sunday morning, I went to work as an announcer at KWKH in Shreveport. The engineer punched the button on the intercom and says, "Your tune, Mexican Joe's, on the hit parade in Billboard magazine." I said, "Oh, go away. I don't feel good this morning." He said, "No kidding. It's in there." I thought, gee whiz, let me see that thing. And I went in the control room, and there it was. And I saw my name, and I thought, well, now, this got to be a misprint. You know, not me, surely.
Mexican Joe, dancing, romancing, always on the go. Sun shining down on Mexican Joe.
I saw this record, Mexican Joe, coming up the charts, and the record became just a real big hit. Now he has 2 or 3 offers from major record companies. And after he made the record deal and decided he was coming to Nashville, he came to town and I met him, and he was wearing a Western cowboy outfit. When he got into Nashville, I said, "Hey," I said, "I think those things have got to go." And we went down to one of the downtown men's clothing stores, and I picked him out a sport coat and half-cut boots and sort of, not exactly a Western, but a gentleman's type shirt that I wanted him to wear. And I said, "You need to be a refined gentleman."
It isn't just black coloured singers in Memphis and the Deep South that sing with soul. It's any singer that sings from within, from deep within. And Reeves once was purported to have said that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. The shortest distance between 2 hearts is a song. And he realised the importance of that one-to-one, of getting the lyric and the tune through to the listener.
From the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, Tennessee, the country music capital of the world, here's your Grand Ole Opry, starring tonight, Jim Reeves.
Railroad, steamboat, river, and canal.
The Grand Ole Opry has been on the air without having missed a broadcast for 35 years. And that speaks well. It's the world's oldest continuous radio broadcast.
Fell in love with a pretty little thing.
Every country singer, not only then, but today, will just about do anything to get a spot or get on the Opry. Becoming a regular member of the Opry, even to this day, is most unique and most unusual, and everybody wants to do it. Jim had become fairly successful on the Hayride. In fact, he was very successful and had done a guest appearance or so on the Opry. But when any artist, and many of them from the Louisiana Hayride did, get to come to the Opry, it was like a highlight in their life. It's just like a step up.
I hope he doesn't come up and warp me for this, but when he came in to Nashville to live and make his move to join the Grand Ole Opry, I said, "Jim," I said, "you know, when they see you on the Grand Ole Opry for the first time, that's the way they're going to remember you. So you're going to have to decide whether you're going to wear a toupee or are you going to just come like you are." And He thought about it, and I said, you can't come up here one night and wear it, and then the next night not wear it. I said, there'll be no acceptance. I said, make up your mind how you're going to go. He chose the toupee.
Have I told you lately when I'm sleeping? Every dream I dream is you somehow. Have I told you why the nights are long when you're not with me? My darling, I'm telling you now. My world would end today if I should lose you. I'm just no good without you anyhow. My dreams would end today if you refuse me. My darling, I'm telling you.
This is Studio B in Nashville, Tennessee, and for many years I produced a lot of records here. And Jim was difficult. He was a perfectionist. He wanted to get it right, and he didn't get along with some of the musicians and singers at times, but he's great with me. I never had any, we never had any altercations at all, nothing. We played golf together and hung out together after sessions. We'd go get a beer and talk, and Jim had a great sense of humor. When people die, we forget that, how funny somebody was. Like Hank Williams, everybody thinks of him as a somber, sad character, but Hank Williams was a very funny dude. So was Jim. Jim had more old Texas sayings than I've ever heard anybody. And I never knew if he made them up or if he collected the things, but he was, and I used to say, boy, I should remember all these things, write them down. When I'd play golf going home, you know, I'd think of all these funny things he'd said.
I had not the slightest idea what it was going to be like working for him. I just knew that I enjoyed his music. And working for him turned out to be not exactly what I expected, I suppose. He was a perfectionist, and because of this, he wasn't always the easiest man to work for. He wanted everything done to perfection his way. And, you know, it was a little bit tough sometimes.
They took me to his house. We spent the night, and Jim asked did I play. Was I a musician? I said, no, these people are friends of Jim, John Ross. I said, yes, he does. And Jim said, does he have his guitar with him? I said, no. John Ross said, yes, he does. And so John went and got the guitar, because I was scared to death. Here I am at Jim Reeves' house. You know, his songs were on the jukebox, and they were being played on the radio. I mean, to me, that's a huge star, you know, so I'm petrified. So anyway, John went and got my guitar, and Jim made me sit down and play a while. And on the way back to Shreveport, John and Clara Lee Ross told me, said, when we were in the kitchen, while y'all were playing, me and Mary and us was in the kitchen talking, said, Jim's thinking about getting a band. Said, you don't know, but you were auditioning. I said, well, that doesn't matter. I'm not good enough. He'll never call me. But 2 weeks later, I was at John's house again, and Jim called and asked me, do I want to go to work? I said, well, do you think I'm good enough? Jim said, yeah, I think you are. I said, well, I'll be there. So I started with him. Of course, I wasn't quite 15 yet, so I lived with him and Mary at that point. They were living in Shreveport, lived with them for 5 years.
We travel in a private bus. I have a 29-passenger diesel-powered bus that we travel in that has bunks in it, and a little lounge where we can rest and take a nap if we so desire. We do a lot of traveling and have a lot of fun.
What is the bus? That's Big Blue. And we drove many miles in that one. But we were going through St. Louis, and there's this old woman, really slow. We were in a hurry, late for the job. And Jim jarred down on the air horn. You could see her in the car just jerk. Boy, she pulled off the side of the road. She was real old. And as we went by, she stuck up a gnarled fist at Jim and shook at it. And Jim, he come unglued. He had to pull off the side of the road himself. He died laughing so hard. She was just giving it that, boy. But that's Jim. He had a great sense of humor. He wasn't putting her down or nothing, but just at that moment, the way she took it and just at him, at Jim Reeves shaking her fist, that just got to him.
Jim Reeves actually lived with the song before he recorded it. He'd take it and study it, he'd sing it on the golf course, in the car. Many of the songs that he was thinking of recording, he'd always make it a point for me to listen to them, either on a demo or he'd sing them to me on the phone or in the car.
If he really liked the song, he'd sing it around and he'd listen to it, and then he'd put it up for a while, put it on the shelf for a while. And sometimes later he'd go back and get it. If it hit him the second time like it did the first time, he'd say, in the studio, I'll go.
When I first met Jim Reeves and started hearing him, he was singing too high. But when we did Four Walls and Anna Marie and some of those things, he sounded much better to me. And so after that, I always tried to keep him down in a low key, because he sounded wonderful to me down low. You know, I'm the one that started singing the Velvet Voice of Jim Reeves or something. We put out an album with that title. So the only differences we ever had was about key, and he knew how well I liked his singing when he got down low, so he never argued with me, but I think he'd kid me once in a while, maybe pitch it up a little too high. And he wasn't a very good tenor, you know, but he's a great baritone.
Overflowing while I sit and whisper your name. Four walls to hear me, four walls to see, four walls to hear me, closing in on me.
That good sound on Jim's voice was, that was Jim Reeves. I mean, he kept wanting to get into the mic and get an intimate sound, because he'd been a radio announcer. He'd studied in college, you know, articulation and enunciation and everything, and he wanted to get that sound, and we could never get it until we got an engineer in who was easy to work with and would experiment and try things. And you know the reason, of course. The reason was because if you got too close to the microphone, you might pop a P, which would make the record skip and get records sent back to the factory, and all those problems from albums and 78s and 45s or whatever we were making then.
Four walls to see. I pulled a boo-boo. Four walls to hear me.
I think he was a man who was forward-looking. He'd plans. He was forever making plans. He never was still. The music changed. His image, he wanted to change. He wanted worldwide acceptance for his sort of music that he loved, country music. And he was never given credit for that. But he was the one person who wanted to change the face of country music. And had he lived, he would have done. He created a unique fusion of country music and popular music. Jim didn't mind being called a popular singer, but he would never have wanted to be called a pop singer. He was a country singer that sang popular songs.
See, all I was trying to do was keep my job and keep from getting fired. So you make a record that sells, and you use that again, but you put something different with it. Because the friends and neighbors out there, they want something different all the time. They won't buy the same record over and over. So we would do that, and we'd try strings. If that sold, we'd continue with that.
We have our ups and downs, like all lovers do. But you know in your heart that I worship you. So don't ever think of setting me free, for you're the only good thing that's happened to me.
Gentleman Jim was an image that he liked, but when one looks at his personal side and his personal life, then perhaps it wasn't all gentlemen. He was a human being, and this is the fascination, that the image which Jim creates on wax is an image which is different at times from that which he experienced in his personal life. He wasn't always the goody-goody. He wasn't always the gentleman. There are stories of him walking off stage because he didn't like his audience. They were riding him, that he wouldn't play because the piano wasn't tuned, and promoters had problems with him. But then that's part of the music scene. It doesn't destroy my faith. It merely tells me that he was a human being like me, with a good side and a bad side.
I guess since the beginning of time, the word love could almost be traded for the word trouble. Because, as a very wise man once said, the course of true love never runs smoothly. And that's kind of the theme of this song. I suppose almost every fella has sat in a phone booth at one time or another and tried to kind of smooth things out with his girlfriend. Let's see how I make out.
I cautioned him. I said, Jim, I said, you'll have to go slow with this song. And he was really a very patient guy. Rarely ever, I never knew him to curse. And he was walking the floor and he was singing, and I said, it's got to be much slower, you know. And he said, well, if I get any slower, he said, I'll never make it through that thing, you know? And he says, why don't you continue managing, let me sing? I tried to sing for him, and I said, I want the thing to go. He said, I'll never make it. I said, Jim, it'll seem like it's eternity, but do what I say.
Put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone. Let's pretend that we're together all alone. I'll tell the man to turn the jukebox way down low. And you can tell your friend there with you, he'll have to go. Whisper to me, tell me, do you love me true? Or is he holding you the way I do? Though love is blind, make up your mind, I've got to know. Should I hang up, or will you tell him he'll have to go?
I was in South Africa on a tour of 10 cities with Floyd Kramer and Chet Atkins and the Blue Boys. Had a lot of fun and was frightened to death because for the first time I was really mobbed by fans. There were 6,000 people at the airport in Johannesburg to meet us, and they tore my clothing off and such things as this, and I couldn't believe this.
Well, it was important to him because, from what I gathered, it was the very first time in his entire career it had ever happened. South Africa was a completely new experience to him. He was, of course, already fairly well known in parts of America, but he was not by any means famous. And in South Africa, he was a star, just like that. Because of his popularity with the Afrikaans section of the public, his recording company, RCA Victor, thought it was a good idea that he should do an album in Afrikaans. And it is a very easy language. So this was done by me actually singing the songs to him so that he could hear the phrasing. And he just picked up all the Afrikaans lyrics and produced them.
As de avondskar is dal, kom ek jou weer in de hal. Jy's my noentjie van de old Transvaal.
During that first visit, one day I just mentioned to him, I asked him, has he never been approached by any filmmakers from Hollywood or whatever? He said, no. I said, would you like to make a picture? He said, oh, yes, I'd like to.
Make way for the brightest, sprightliest musical since the discovery of diamonds. America's favorite gentleman of song becomes South Africa's singiest, zingiest screen discovery. Jim Reeves as the man with a hand in your pocket and a song in his heart. Kimberly Jim.
I'll pass along this way just one time only. A fleeting moment in eternity.
So maak gereed voor die rolprent waar die met lekker lach en mooie muziek gaan terugvoer naar die oude dae. Met Madeline Usher, Arthur Swimmer, Clive Parnell en Jim Reeves. En Jamie Ace, een nieuwe treffer, Kimberly Jim.
And then a South African magazine ran a story about the movie, and I've got a copy here actually. This dates back to September 1963. And this was the first time that he ever appeared on the cover of a magazine, and he was thrilled with that. And after that, whenever a new magazine appeared in South Africa, he wanted to know from me, why didn't you get me inside and on the cover? I want to be on every cover in this country.
Why don't you relax and let's take stock of the situation?
Well, to begin with, we're flat broke.
Yeah, and Ben Frost is closing the show tonight. That means we're out of a job tomorrow.
No job, no money, no car. We can't even get out of this town.
But we do have a diamond claim.
That's our biggest liability.
Now, what we gotta do is to get rid of that claim and get out of here.
That's a good idea, but for one thing, nobody wants it.
Yes, to do Bert Patterson does. You said yourself, anytime he could raise the cash, he could have the claim.
Don't make me laugh. Where do you think he's going to raise 240 pounds?
I think I know.
You stop thinking. We're in enough trouble as it is.
Well, look, it's simple. All I gotta do is this, Jim.
Don't tell me, don't tell me. I don't think I could stand another one. All I want to think about is getting out of this town.
Well, you leave it to me. This is a great idea, and nothing's gonna go wrong.
Here we go again.
The whites, they felt he was one of their very own, because he made it clear that he wanted to actually settle in South Africa eventually, because this was his country. He was a star. He wasn't a star in America, not yet. And he even mentioned that he wanted to buy a cattle farm and settle down. Well, this all never came to pass, of course. He died. But the blacks took to him immediately, too, because they heard his voice on the radio all the time. He was being plugged from morning till night. And they liked his songs, too, because the country music is very big with the black population in South Africa. As a matter of fact, after his death, I mean, by that time, old 78 shellacs were virtually out of production all over the world, including South Africa. But his record company, RCA Victor, had to keep on pressing 78 recordings for the rest of Africa, for black Africa, for years after that, right into the 70s. Most of his hit recordings were still available on 78 shellacs for the blacks to wind up their little gramophones and play it. Somewhere in the bush, I presume. So the blacks liked him very much because he came over as a very sincere and a very nice person, which he was. What they didn't know is that he was like most Southerners from America, and the Afrikaans population, the Boers, could sense, and they liked him even more for that. But he didn't mind the popularity amongst the blacks, and he never let it show through.
I heard Jim Reeves sing when I was about 11 years old, back in Jamaica, on a radio station. As a Christian, he sings about the things that we believe in. His songs express how we feel. This is one of our favorite Jim Reeves gospel album. On here, there's many songs that we sing in our church, and there's a number of them in our songbook. I believe the favorite one is This World Is Not My Home. It's one of the special ones that's loved by all. And Jim Reeves is one of the best-known gospel singer that we know, apart from the black gospel. In country and western, Jim Reeves is the best known. And I'm sure he's loved by all, especially the older folks. They love this type of singing. I love him as well.
Just born to be lucky as a gambling man must be. Born to be lucky with $1 million, that's for me.
But once he'd tasted stardom, Jim wanted more of it. And there wasn't more, because during 63 and 64, the records really took off all around the world. They got into the charts in Europe and in the UK and in Ireland. And more tours, more films were all being planned. And really, he was well on his way to becoming the first truly international country music singer.
Just born to be a lucky gambling man from Tennessee.
My favorite hobby at the moment is flying, and I enjoy it very much. As a matter of fact, a couple of days ago, my wife and I returned from a trip to the Southwest, that is, to Texas and to Mexico.
I remember it was the Sunday. I was out with my wife, visiting friends, and as was my wont at that time, I would read somebody else's newspaper. I could never afford to buy a Sunday paper. And I can remember picking up the Sunday Express, and words jumped out at me in a very small section of the front page. It said, "Hillbilly singer feared missing in plane crash."
It was like 2 minutes till 5. It's actually when the time had happened, on a Friday afternoon on the 31st of July. And we didn't think a whole lot about it not being there, because we felt like that maybe the storm may have delayed him coming in, because there had been a terrible storm that afternoon.
The experience that I felt then, I've never felt since. To say it was weird would be an understatement. It was as if somebody was telling me that my own father or mother had died. I didn't know the man, never met the man, and yet something inside me was going wrong.
The cause again of Jim's accident was bad weather, a loss of visibility, and a turbulent July storm. This is an exactness of Jim's single-engine Beechcraft Debonair. He was the pilot, one passenger, his piano player of the Blue Boys band, Dean Manuel.
I couldn't sleep that night. And sure enough, the next day came the announcement on the news that Jim had been found, and it had taken since the Friday evening to find him. And all the papers on that day were full of the news. And I was visibly saddened, as millions of other fans around the world were as well.
This is a synonymous view with Brentwood, where Jim's plane went down. Faithfully, and a search party immediately organized were found to your lower right. The leather wallet had 3 $10 bills and Jim's diamond ring.
And so my personal opinion is, I think he might have gotten vertigo or something and thought he was pulling out of it when he actually went straight down. Took 2 days to find him, because it was such a wooded area, and him going straight down. They were unable to see him from the light planes and helicopters that were searching for him. They had about 500 people out searching for him, including various artists and people in the industry, as well as friends and neighbors, and, you know, just people from all over were searching for him. Sad time. It was a 2-day nightmare for us there.
You have to separate your private lives from your professional lives. The main thing was to keep things going as best I could, see. Actually, I expanded the business rather than going away, you know. See, I worked with Jim all the time, and I worked in his office, and along with Joyce Jackson, and who was his secretary. And I just knew what his business was. I knew the contracts, I knew what kind of deals he had, I knew what he had recorded. So it was just a natural thing, since I knew about all that and enjoyed doing it, you see. It was the natural thing for me to continue.
It could have all stopped then, but Mary made a very quick decision. She talked with the powers that be at RCA, and they had a meeting and decided that this had to go on. He was too great to just stop right there.
He had a little studio, and I would give him songs, and he'd take them and try them in his studio with his musicians. Also, he would find songs, and he would do the same thing. He would go in there and make demos.
And Mary Reeves grabbed all those. And she would kid him, you know, I'm going to keep these. And anything ever happens to you, I've got all these tapes. She told me that once, or words to that effect. I'm just paraphrasing. So that is the reason. She was a big fan, I suppose, of Jim Reeves, and she collected a lot of tapes.
It was very shrewd and clever business strategy. You see, instead of flooding the market at one go and making a killing with all songs Jim had ever done, Mary got RCA's approval to release the material over a period of years. And she'd pick selections from a collection of demo tapes. And Chet Atkins and the other producers would wipe off the old backing tracks and add a complete new, up-to-date orchestration. So what you ended up with was a brand new Jim Reeves record to release.
Well, I became a little bit of everything. I did the copyrights. I still contacted all the DJs, still plugging his records just as if he were there. And he was, you know, we've gone through the majority of his material now, but for many years we had fresh material all the time, and it was just like him, you know, being there recording. So fortunately, Jim left quite a legacy and kept a lot of us working a long time. Thank goodness.
Is it really over? Is this the end of the line? Don't tell me I'm losing the love that was mine.
Can you remind us in this room as we look before us?
If you're really take some part of me, so I'll always remember how sweet love used to be.
You could say at that particular juncture, the Jim Reeves fan club was born because long-handed letters became duplicated letters. Duplicated letters stretched into a small magazine, which we were to be originally an appreciation society. This sounds much more sedate and down to earth than a fan club, which has images of youngsters and screaming kids and pop idols. Sadly, the gentleman who was producing our covers thought we ought to be a fan club, and he put fan club on the front cover. So at first I was extremely annoyed, but really, at the end of the day, he couldn't have picked a better term, because the people who I've had to deal with and have come in contact with have all been fans, if you understand the word as being short for fanatic, because every Jim Reeves fan is a fanatic, in inverted commas. Someone who is prepared to carry their adulation to an extreme.
I think that I first really realized that he was such a phenomena in the international world, actually upon his death. I mean, I went there every day. I worked for him, and he was just my boss. And I didn't really realize the success that he had attained internationally, I don't think, until he died. And the telegrams that came pouring in from countries from all over, 60 or more countries, I thought, wow, you know, I just didn't realize that because he was just my boss, my friend. You all just fascinated me last night with your little nitpicking technical things. Yeah, it was fantastic. And I couldn't do that because I lived, like I said, I lived with it. It's just taken for granted. I just, but to watch you guys get real technical and get down to splitting hairs on that, it's amazing. I know.
I think the seeds found good earth inside. I think it wasn't a passing fad. I soon realized that. It became a way of life, and I think once you've experienced a way of life, it's very hard to let it go. For 11 years, Jim Reeves was part of every day, like eating and sleeping and working. The phone would ring, there were letters to write, there were things to do, there was conventions to organize. There was virtually something every day built around the music of Jim Reeves.
I hear the sound of
wall here, we have a picture of Jim and his dog Cheyenne. Jim was real fond of his dog, and after he died, Mary had him embalmed and flown to Texas and buried with Jim.
Many of them that did not even believe that he had gotten killed because they thought he was in other parts of the country performing because we would release new material, things they'd never heard before. So they just didn't believe it.
So it's a natural thing. If you hear somebody's records and people talking about him all the time, then you think he's around somewhere. So even some of the people who work at RCA think, who is this Reeves guy? You know, he never comes around and says. The distributors, who does he think he is? You know?
The most extreme and amazing example, if you like, of Jim's career carrying on after his death was in 1981, when Mary had the idea of putting Jim's voice together with another dead country singer, Patsy Cline. Now, Patsy had died in 1963, the year before Jim, also in a plane crash. Now, by sheer chance, there were a few songs that both recorded at completely different times. So Mary decided to get Owen Bradley, who'd been Patsy Cline's original producer, to combine these two dead voices onto one record.
Fortunately, Chet Atkins, who had recorded Jim, had practiced very good isolation on his voice, and we'd become sort of a fanatic on isolation over at our studio, and so we were able to wipe out the bands, his band and Patsy's band, and put a new band on. And so it really wasn't all that difficult. The fact that the thing that was really amazing was that they were almost in the same tempo, and they were in the same key, and we had no control over that at all.
You want me to.
It still gives me cold chills, the fact that that's working like that.
I hadn't heard it in a long time. It sounds pretty good.
Yeah. Might ought to reissue this one. It worked. It's a hit.
Jim's voice was almost the same as a fine instrument, a harp or something like that reached into people's feelings with maybe not actually even understanding the words. You've heard speakers that could do that. Something about it, it was charisma.
Even today, I'll sit there, I'll put his records on right today, and I'm playing on them. But it doesn't seem like that's another world. That's another musician. That's not me, because Jim sings so good that I really can't, I don't think about that being me playing behind him. That's just a great singer that I'm just sitting here just loving to hear sing.
We were only giving the people what they wanted to buy, what they wanted to hear, and that's what the record companies are still doing. It's harder now because there's so much conformity in everything. Record companies run the radio stations in this country because they tell them what to play. But in Jim's, back when Jim was around, it was much easier, and if we could get a song started, a record started in St. Louis, we could usually spread it all over the country and all over the world. It's a wonderful time to be making records.
Here's one of our half-ass tunes. It was a hit here in Norway. Adios, amigo. Adios, my friend. The road we have traveled has come to an end.
Sadly, Jim was never great during his lifetime. He would never have described himself, I don't think, as being great during his lifetime. Had he gone on, then I think he certainly would have achieved greatness. But then we wouldn't have had the adventure that we've had since 1964, for the last 25 years.
To name one muchacho for me, away from these memories, my life I must spend. Adios, amigo. Adios, my friend. Adios, amigo. Let Let us shed no tears. May all your mañanas bring joy through the years. I ride to the Rio where my life I must spend. Adios, amigo. Adios, my friend.